The ASAE Research Foundation is pleased to present Greg Putman from Visit Flanders.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, Andrea. I'm very happy to have you all here to talk about the future of work. We have a very exciting speaker lineup for you this afternoon. One person from Flanders, two from the US, and hopefully we'll get into a very interesting discussion about the future of work and technology and all related. Before we dive into it, I just want to give you a quick introduction on Flanders. For those who are not familiar, Flanders is the northern Dutch-speaking region of Belgium. Here on this map, you can see it in yellow. So it's a very small region. It's about the size of Connecticut compared in size, but it's very well connected and there's a lot to do and see there. We are connected with cities around the globe, also in the United States, Washington, DC and New York, but also other connections are opening up as we slowly get out of the pandemic. Now, Flanders is mostly known for her majestic arts cities, and Bruges is just one of them. Bruges is this medieval town, it's World UNESCO Heritage Site, and it's very known for hosting smaller scale conferences. There is a brand new convention center opening. It's pictured in the bottom here of the screen. It's opening in February 2022, and I'm actually hosting a small tour for associations to have a live visit. So if you're interested, please just drop me a note in the chat and we can take it from there. Another very exciting city in Flanders is, of course, Brussels. Brussels is the capital of Belgium, capital of Flanders, home to the European institutions and NATO. It's, of course, known for chocolate and other delicious food and beverages. It's our main conference town, but so is Antwerp. Antwerp is Belgium's second city, located just north of Brussels. It's the international diamond trade capital of the world. It's known for fashion and amazing architecture. Among it, I have to mention the new convention center, a room with a zoo. Many of the breakout rooms of the convention center look out over the historic parks of the Zoo of Antwerp. Truly a unique location for when you have your conference in Flanders. And then, of course, there's Ghent. Ghent is this other medieval town, sits between Brussels and Bruges, truly a hidden gem. It's known for arts, heritage, culture, but also music festival. And it's the largest university town in Belgium, along with Leuven, this other amazing beer city. In general, Flanders is known for arts, culture, food, gastronomy, and beer. Brussels and Flanders count more than 75 Michelin star restaurants, so you eat quite well when you are in Flanders. But of course, saying goodbye to the cities is always the hardest part, and this satisfaction chart is something I love to share with my audiences because it just shows how much people love coming to Flanders after they've visited it. Like, they always give good remarks, and hopefully some of you I can bring along and give a similar experience or satisfaction. Now, we all know that the current tourism model is under pressure. The world is facing numerous challenges, and destination marketing organizations around the world are trying to find a solution or an answer to these challenges. Visit Flanders also has summarized these challenges in a new strategy, Travel to Tomorrow. Symbolized for this project is this art piece. This is a huge whale jumping out of the canals in Bruges. It's made of more than 1 ton of plastic that was found on the shores of Hawaii. Truly a symbolic image that summarizes our whole strategy about Travel to Tomorrow. Find more information on the website. I will summarize it here for you in just 1 minute. Basically, as a destination marketing organization, we want to find a balance between the quality of life for our residents, but also the quality of tourist experience for our visitors. Meanwhile, having a nice climate for entrepreneurs. All of this coming together in a flourishing community. We see congresses as a catalyst for positive impact. Now, this all sounds a little bit fluffy and wordy, but what this means is that as the Convention Bureau, we try to focus on those conferences that relate directly to our DNA in Flanders. Today's topic, technology, Industry 4.0, the future, is one of those. Flanders is world-renowned for their research when it comes to Industry 4.0 and all things related, smart energy as well. And we're very happy and proud to have John with us today to share his vision as an expert of Flanders, but then of course also shouldered by two experts in the same field on the United States side. So I would say, let's get into it, but not before I recommend you to download this free ebook. It was created by Visit Flanders, and it really shows you experts in Flanders on why you should have your technology-related conference in our destination. For the first few downloads, we have a chocolate sweepstakes. So I would say do not hesitate. I will post the link in the chat. And for now, I will just leave it back to Andrea, and I would say let's get into the discussion. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Brecht. I'll be pulling up this information to share with you.
A major research initiative of the ASAE Research Foundation, ASAE Foresight Works is a collection of future-focused resources designed to help association professionals and volunteer leaders better understand the drivers of change that will affect the future of their work and help association leaders become better practitioners of foresight. Foresight is a critical component of business leadership, but foresight practice can add value and strategic insight throughout an association. Foresight is not the same as trends. Trends knowledge is helpful, but can only tell you what people are doing now, not what you may need to know to prepare for the future. Foresight Works research takes a longer view, identifying drivers of change that are or will be important to the future work of associations. Within the ASAE Foresight Works collection is the User's Guide, which provides general guidance for starting a foresight journey and prioritizing drivers of change, and the Collected Drivers of Change, which contains all 50 action briefs. Action briefs are 4-page resources that describe a driver of change, providing forecasts, data points, strategic insights, and potential courses of actions. Use Foresight Works with your board, volunteer committees, or staff to support and advance conversations about potential changes ahead that will affect your association and the world more broadly. Associations should consider the implications and benefits of automation, both for their members and for their own operations and competitive positioning. We know different fields will be affected differently by automation. Association leaders can identify how they or their membership might be impacted. Automation will push more work to be taskified. Taskification could unintentionally smooth the way for further automation. Additionally, associations serving industries, professions, or disciplines with increased automation and in which workers are losing their livelihoods could lose members. Meanwhile, new structures are emerging to support workers' rights and protections in the face of economic change. To make the new world of work to benefit both workers and employers means finding ways to give workers more economic security and control. Associations may take a role in offering safety net benefits directly to members and help member organizations develop these kinds of services for themselves. Giving alternative workers certain kinds of benefits can trigger an official employment relationship that requires a full slate of benefits. Resolving the issue will mean revising labor laws. With COVID-19 likely to be endemic and permanently circulating in populations around the world, it has already impacted workforce and the workplace. Associations and industries will negotiate rapid changes in work patterns in the pandemic's aftermath, including determining who works remotely and by which criteria. This may drive new questions about talent acquisition, compensation and benefits, flexible schedules and hours, and where employees live. Association leaders need to be prepared for coronavirus flare-ups and more dire alternative scenarios. If these scenarios occur, many changes and disruptions would accelerate or reinforce each other, strongly affecting all organizations and industries. For more information or to get these resources, visit asaecenter.org/Foresight Works.
Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth George, Director of Member Engagement and Chapter Development with the American Guild of Organists. And I'm also very pleased to serve this year on ASAE's Technology Council. I want to thank Visit Flanders for sponsoring this, and as well to the ASAE Research Foundation, and last but certainly not least, our wonderful donors. So I think we're in for a very illuminating webinar today. We have two subject knowledge experts who are really going to be able to articulate where we are and where we're going to be going. I'm going to start first by introducing our first of two speakers. John Bakelmans is the Science and Technology Attaché Americas for the region of Flanders in Belgium. In that role, he supports Flemish health and life science companies to establish themselves in the US, or he leads American technology investors towards Flanders. Previously, John worked for 21 years at Cisco as their Global IoT Solutions Chief Technology Officer. He was a group vice president at IMEC, a world-leading nanotechnology innovator, and was CEO of an IoT scale. Rick Balcom is CEO and founder of Symmetry, a consulting firm that is leveling the digital playing field for people of purpose. And Rick also serves on ASAE's Technology Council. The CIM peeps are disruptioneers. I love those. I love that title. Thank you, Rick. Who connect the digital dots between people, process, and technology to create value for the association and for nonprofits. Rick describes himself as a technologist, a futurist, a digital native since before it was cool. So let's set the stage. We've all been through this pandemic, and staffs have become leaner as a result of it, and organizations are really seeking to automate work. So the automation of work is going to very clearly be based on the industry, the workplace, and the occupations. However, no matter which of these it impacts, it's clearly going to transform work and the effect workers will have at every level. So this first question really follows up to what I have just said. How has the workforce changed and evolved in a world that's been shaped by the pandemic?
John, go right ahead, sir.
Appreciate it, Rick. If you look at what has been happening, I think the last 2 years or so, I think it's clear that work, where it typically was done at a location, is not a location anymore. And I think as long as you have a good connection, if you have proper camera and lighting, I think you can work. I think the balance in the family between work and life has been changed dramatically, but I think it's also evolved to a better place. And of course, we all I think have seen a number of these funny interviews where in the background some funny stuff happens. And today I hope it doesn't happen behind me. But those funny moments happened, and it made, I think, work a little bit more human. But for me, the biggest takeaway is probably that work has become more focused on results and not on the time you spend in that chair at your workplace. And for me, that is a big plus to the evolution of work during the pandemic. Rick, what is it for you?
I agree. I think that the pandemic has only accelerated a trend that was already in progress. And what I mean by that, I think the definition of workplace has been changing for a while. And if you think about it in terms of industrial revolution or however you want to approach it, certainly that work is becoming more digital, and the work flow is becoming more asynchronous. It's no longer about the positioning of inputs and outputs in the same place necessarily. So when I think about what's changed the most, I think it is the definition of workplace has changed, and that's changing and having an impact on the workforce as a result of that. So I agree completely, John.
I know for me, it's forced my staff and my team to be more collaborative. That's a given for us to be successful. So there's a lot more collaboration, which I think is a good thing, because I know some of us in association workforce can be siloed in what we do. So it's definitely helped me. And I'm delighted to say that my dog has been put in another room, so you're not going to hear her barking during this. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about what the skills are going to be needed to use this technology. What do association professionals need to learn? What do I need to learn? I know there's still so much more I need to learn.
I think from my perspective, what we need to learn is new leadership styles as much as anything, because if we go back to what I said earlier, which is work is more asynchronous and workplace has changed. You know, we think of our workplaces in an industrial setting, right? That's the way we approach work as leaders and managers of work. We tend to think of, we've got to collect people in a location, we've got to assemble their inputs and outputs in a certain place. And, you know, as leaders, we tend to want to manage what I think of as command and control. Less articulately, maybe butts in seats, you know, is somebody there, right? And are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? So I think the thing that we need to learn the most, it plays into technology as well, but I think the leadership style and the management style is probably the biggest change that I see coming. And the collaboration is now a function of, can we lead digitally, and are we digital first in our leadership styles?
Yeah, I concur here. And I think if you look at the technology, Rick, there has been an evolution, right? Over the last 2 years, even if you look at all the players who came to the forefront, I think if you know how to tap the join button, you can be part of the discussion. Now, one thing I again appreciate because of everything what happened is people tend to come more on time, because the meeting starts at that time and it stops at that time. And you might be back to back with other people because you want to reach out to your colleagues, to your coworkers. So it means meetings start and stop on time, and you need to be a little bit more prepared than in the past. I think that's, at least for me, that has gone for me very well. Now, one other thing I think is good is that people tend to listen more. If in meetings where everybody's face to face and where the non-digital people meet, there's tend to be some turmoil in some parts of the meeting where other people's trying to still meet, right? But I think in this case, as long as there are a number of key, let me call it agreements between each other, like an etiquette that we put our video on, because then we know people pay attention. I tend to think that if the leadership adopts well to this new style of leading teams, these digital capabilities tend to increase the efficiency of the workers versus decrease them. And that's why I think It has certainly accelerated the amount of innovation and digitization over the last couple of months, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've been measuring productivity the wrong way, right? We've been measuring productivity by how much time you spend in a chair in front of whatever your workflow is, and I think that's something as a culture we're going to have to figure out how to redefine, base it on outputs and production in a different way than what we thought of traditionally.
I agree. I think the traditional 8-hour day has changed. It's fluctuated. It may not be 8 consecutive hours. And that we are working differently. And I'm so glad, John, that you talked about listening, because that was one of the first things that I was thinking in my head. It's my listening skills have improved. They have to, so that we can make sure we're communicating as clearly as we can. But so when we talk about skills, for me as an association professional, what are there any is there technology forthcoming that you think will be on the forefront very shortly that perhaps I don't know about? And my perspective is, as a user, I know Slack has helped me at my job. I now feel very comfortable on Zoom and hitting that join button, whether I'm leading a discussion or participating in it. But I guess there's so much new technology coming down the road. Do you think that there's just one that's right over the horizon that is really going to make a difference in how we work and collaborate?
Yeah, I think of it more along the lines of the technologies that we've had that are now converging. Yeah. And there's two in particular that come to the fore. And decades ago, I learned about Moore's Law in my computer classes about how fast the computing power is evolving. And I can't quote it directly, but it's, basically the computing power doubles on some very strict cadence, and, and it continues to evolve. And that's held true for, 50 years now, since the first microprocessors came about. And the other technology that's intersected with that is bandwidth. Before I came to the association industry, I worked in telecommunications, and I think about the things that are possible now because of the ubiquitous bandwidth. If you think about the pandemic and the way we responded to it just over the past 18 months, we probably would not have been as successful at that 5 years ago. You think about how often were you getting the little spinning dials when you were trying to stream things 5 years ago as compared to now. So the intersection of bandwidth and computing power has made so much more possible. I know John can speak to IoT and AI and those kinds of things as well, which are, those are the futurist kinds of things that are going to impact how work is done. So I think of those two as the enabling intersections of technology, the bandwidth and the computing power, which makes everything else possible.
Yeah, of course, and the advent of the smartphone. At the end of the day, if you look at it, this is a 11, 12 years old technology, and look how much iterations we had. Look at the evolution indeed of the bandwidth and how 5G can really make things real time. And that really timeliness and the fact that I can be on a call like this one or a call with my colleagues in a park and still be there live in an HD kind of fashion brings it all to the next level. And you're going to see a further evolution of that. But Moore's Law is there still to stay. I mean, yes, there is an end to what people can do in the terms of microprocessors and the amount of transistors on a chip, but also there's a lot of evolution still to become and to help us. One thing I think, which I see, Rick, a little bit evolving too for the better, is the simplicity. I think if you looked at this 10 years ago, how many people were still challenged of putting a video conference from one to a couple of parties? It was, you always needed somebody from the IT department. He needed to make the call for the secretary. This is now over. I think the technology companies have understood that simplicity is key towards adoption. And the more simple, the more easy you can make it, the more, similar look and feel you can make it, the better your technology will be adopted and for the better. And I think that's a big advantage.
And I think that's a lesson for us in the association world is the user experience has changed, right? The technology. I mean, the first time I picked up an iPhone 10, I was like, where's the button? And, before that, it was, with the iPhone 8 or 7 or whatever it was before that, it's where are the rest of the buttons, and so that user experience has certainly been enabled by technology, but it's certainly powering technology as well, which is part of the conversation you can have about new skill sets is member journey, risk management, understanding how to experiment and evolve as well.
Well, I know it's forced me to become far more nimble and to be able to pivot. And the days of looking at a manual about how to use something are long gone. And I guess I'm in the dark ages because I've still got an iPhone 8, but maybe that'll change. So in talking about this, how are associations managing automated work in a new workforce in a world that's been shaped by the pandemic?
Well, I have this theory, and of course, if you've been working in environments where you have a lot of what people will call geeks, you kind of get spoiled by the things you see there. And one of my theories is that companies need to more embrace the automation the employees themselves bring to automating their own job. And what I mean with that is, if you think about the people who are really good at that are the programmers, right? They try to program themselves out of a job. And you need to embrace that as a company, because if they keep on doing it, secretively, to work a little bit less and to be a little bit more lazy, then the company will not benefit from that. You cannot evolve those people to another level and let them do something else. So as a company, you should incentivize this kind of behavior and need to keep the automation forthcoming, not just top down, but also bottom up. I think that's a very important incentive. And it takes me back, Rick, I'm sure you remember the days when the IT departments were the ones who told you what you can do and what you cannot do. And in those days, things like shadow IT came about, where people started to do their own things because they were not allowed to take on any setting in their laptops. And then shadow IT comes about, and then you get a whole amount of different issues in the company. The same with automation. Embrace it, incentivize it, bring it up so that other people can benefit from it, and so that the rest of company can use the automation moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. The trend is citizen developers, right? So the end, we used to call it end user computing or whatever. There were a lot of labels for it, but the fact that you're putting that much power in the hands of the citizenry, it should be available, and it should be sanctioned in the right ways from the organizational level. I mean, I know in my own career, I started off as a systems analyst and then worked in data processing, and then it became IT. I don't know what the next iteration is, because we're no longer just information technology. We're innovation technology is what we should be in terms of the future. And in the association world, that's difficult because as I've kind of mused about with my technology council partners, we live in an industry that by lots of measures is a best of breed to some degree, not very progressive in terms of the applications that are available to us. And most of us are struggling with how do we get all this stuff to work together? And that's the skill set that I think in this very now distributed environment that becomes even more difficult.
I just wrote down citizens developers versus end users. I think that's a very, very cool world, and I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I don't have the time to get frustrated if I can't use something immediately. If I hear one more person say, "Well, it's intuitive," sometimes I have to say, "Okay, you need to just explain what that means to me in layman terms so that I know what to do next." But okay, I'm going to ask you now, and Rick, as a futurist, and I know John as well, put your futurist hats on. So, how are these trends going to accelerate in the next year, in the next 5 years, and if we even think of in the next 20 years? Wow, that's really thinking far out. But love to hear your thoughts about this.
20 years is so far out, I can't even imagine. My career has spanned now almost 5 decades. And when I think about the first commercial computers that I worked with were the size of Mack trucks and didn't even have a screen on them. We literally typed things in on a terminal. And what's happened in that 5 decades has been just incredible. So, and it's just accelerated faster and faster. I think in terms of projecting forward 5 years, 10 years, to me, I think the nature of work changes. And I think that, we hear a lot about Big Brother and automation taking over factory floors and all of that. I think that's probably pretty much run its course in terms of automating factory floors. There's a lot of monitoring and things like that that'll happen. I think the next place where we're going to see that is in automating the professions. And what I mean by that is some of the rote knowledge worker kinds of stuff that is repetitive or even sequenced in a way that you could teach the AI to make those decisions. I think you're going to see more and more of that happening. And I think you're going to see us as humans playing a quality control or quality assurance role in how our professions are exercised and how they're done. So I think the lines between the physical and the digital workers or workforce is going to blur even more over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, my thinking is similar, although I want to stick to the topic of post-pandemic kind of collaboration. And if you think about it, if we're all honest here, we miss these live interactions. That's clear, right? We miss probably the stop at the coffee corner, right? How do we bring in the stop at the coffee corner where the informal things take place? How do we bring that where people still can work from anywhere? And for me, creating real life holograms, right? Because I think we can. And to all meet in the same room. You see that we have different backdrops today. What if we were as if we were in the same room and we would look 3D amongst each other? How would that experience be? And I think we have the opportunity to go for it. I've seen in my past, I've worked in a big IT company. I've seen a couple of tryouts for that. We were not there yet, but it's coming. And I would love to see the evolution there. And I would love to see the mix between virtual and live, right? There's people there virtual, there's people live. What if you could really see the guy sitting next to you, even if he's 5,000 miles away from you? But for me, and I agree, 20 years, nobody can think, perhaps we're all living on Mars by then, if we keep pushing the space race. But for me, innovation, there's still a lot of innovation to be done. I love the fact that we keep on pushing the boundaries. I love the fact that people are accepting more that this can become more digitized. But you can also feel that now that we're easing upon the pandemic, that people still love their real life interaction. So if we can keep on evolving there and keep it very simple and straightforward, I think that's where I'm dreaming of tonight and the next couple of weeks as well. So
I love thinking of the experience of being a hologram and being able to sit next to someone in a virtual room and feel a much closer connectivity. So that I hope I'm still sitting upright when that happens. So any final thoughts, anything we haven't covered that you feel is important that we should address today?
Not for me. I think these were great questions. And again, people need to believe, people need to accept, people need to react if it's not good enough. And I think Rick said something very important. User experience and capability of that experience and the evolution of that is going to be very important. And so people who design the experience are more than ever important in the evolution of the technology.
For me, I think the last topic that I would introduce is just being aware of the structural change that's happened. The pandemic for me was a structural change, and what I mean by that is that, I mean, think about the evolution of the microchip and those things back through our history. There have been these structural changes, things that really just changed everything about how we were approaching something. And I think the pandemic has created a structural change in the workforce and the workplace, how we marry digital and physical together. And I think those are things that we need to be more aware of. And if I were telling my clients the skill sets they need to really foster is really look at your risk management, your scenario planning, how you're going to prepare for the next pandemic. Hopefully it's not a pandemic, but you could posit that, hey, there's an internet outage coming somewhere down the line, right? Because now we're all completely dependent on it for our work. And, one major internet outage can really throw things off the rails in terms of getting work done. So I would say be aware of the things that could happen and the structural changes that are kind of embedded in the technology. We got technology all around us. Who knew they couldn't manufacture cars because of a chip shortage? None of us thought about that 2 or 3 years ago, but now we can't buy cars because the chip shortage is so prevalent. So think about those structural changes and the unintended consequences of where we set ourselves up for how the workforce and workplace gets defined.
Well, thank you so much, Rick and John. This has been just such a rich conversation. I think we could probably go on a little longer, but we're going to stop for now. And I want to thank again our ASAE Research Foundation and Visit Flanders. And we'll see you soon, maybe as holograms. Stay tuned for live Q&A. It's coming up very shortly. Okay, well, we have a question. Actually, it's in two parts, Rick and John. So I'm going to ask you both, in your roles, how do you define productivity? What do you look for in others that demonstrates productivity?
That's a great question because I think we're all still struggling with this, right? If you look at traditional measures, you look at output, how many hours and you spend on something or how many widgets you produce. And I think in my world, we're tending to focus more on outcome rather than output. So are we getting to the goals that we set out? And there are lots of systems for measuring outcomes, OKRs, objectives and key results, those kinds of things. And I think that is more accommodated for measuring production in a digital setting than the old, how many of or how many hours we spend in front of things. At least that's what I think. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think for me, it's doing more with less. So if you think about it, can you achieve the same thing as if you would, in the pre-COVID days, had to fly across the country? And can you do it now by flying 40 or 50 or 60% less? Can you achieve the same objectives? And can you even improve it over time? So I think that's for me, the drivers, doing more with less. And I agree with you. It's about outcome capabilities. It's about setting goals for yourself, for your organization. That's what I think is really key, and getting people to do better but not by working harder or longer, but by working smarter. And working smarter means trying to use tools and capabilities you might not have had before, and where you're now using those capabilities to really drive up the overall productivity of your business or your company or yourself by basically doing more with less. And it's different for everybody. So I don't think there is a generalistic cookbook on how to do this, but I think it really helps. In what I sometimes do is I try to assess my entire job, and I try to look at it from outside in, and how can I disrupt myself, or how would somebody else do my job if he didn't have my habits? And doing that learns a lot about you and yourself, you as your role in the company, and you as the company trying to do whatever you want with your company. So that would be my take.
And I think the second part of that question was, what do we look for in people, to enable those things? And we certainly look for digital skill sets, critical thinking skills, risk management kind of backgrounds, those things that kind of, I think I said in the session that I think that human beings are going to become more QA, kind of oversight of the automation and the things that we're talking about here. So you need all of those skill sets, and that's what we look for in people in terms of enabling all of that.
Interesting question here. What role can employers play in helping remote workers access shared documents and platforms, especially when considering internet access, bandwidth, and security?
Yeah, I'll give you my spin on it. I think pre-COVID times, some people were able and some people were not able to work from home. Some people were allowed and some people were not allowed to work from home. Some people had a laptop, some people only had a desktop. Some people were repaid their internet expenses, some people were not. I hope those discussions are now over, and that we can assume that if work is not a location anymore, but is anywhere you want and is shared between your home and between the office, then also make it as simple as possible for your employees to do that work from any location. I always say, give your employees the tools and get out of the way, and they will figure it out. And once you've set the priorities and the goals, the results will forthcome. And so I believe that employers have to make it easier, have to facilitate it. And once you facilitate it, employees will follow. And don't be afraid, because they're not sitting in that chair, like Rick said in the session, that they will not be productive. So make it easy, facilitate it, make it simple as part of the package. Don't treat it specially anymore. That's what I think we should all do.
Yeah, I think I used the word sanctioned in the session, that it should be sanctioned. And when I walked into clients before the pandemic, the policy about remote work usually read something like, working from home is a privilege, not I hope we're, John and Elizabeth, I hope we're past all of that, because we pivoted and suddenly it was no longer a privilege, it was a mandate. And things like internet access were, we at the beginning of the pandemic, we still struggled with, do we subsidize internet access for our workers because they're working from home? I think all those questions are legitimate and need to be answered. And why is it any different, that you're provisioning it at their home? I think these artificial boundaries from the past are need to go away.
It's interesting because my executive director, when I was hired a little over 2 years ago, was adamant that I had to visit the New York office at least once a month for 7 to 10 days. By the way, I'm working remotely from my home office in Delray Beach. And the rest of the time I was traveling so much. And when COVID hit, everything stopped in March of 2020. And since then, my executive director, who I think thought he could never work outside of his actual office, now appreciates the fact with the technology that he doesn't have to travel an hour and a half to get into the city every day. And I want to say about 4 months ago, he said to me, Elizabeth, I see absolutely no reason for you to come into the office unless you're traveling through for a meeting. And I said, wow, that's pretty amazing. Well, I know I still will want to come by and say hello to everybody. You can't replace that personal connection. We have a wonderful comment here from Polly Karpowitz. I love this discussion. It seems as important as ever for associations to ensure that their digital engagements with stakeholders are developed by a close alliance of staff from tech, communications, membership, and program staff. The pandemic has highlighted clearly that good technology is critical and important in the advance of legwork across cross-department alliances to create meaningful online experiences for our members and our stakeholders. And you, of course, have talked a lot about that today.
Yeah, when I speak to crowds, I always ask people which, hold in one hand your smartphone and the other hand your wallet. Which would you rather lose? Right? And almost universally now, I'd rather lose my wallet than my smartphone because it's my digital twin. And that's what I was referring to earlier, is that boundary between digital and physical are now blurring even more. And our digital tool sets and companions are now part of us in a way that's furthering these engagements and how we work with each other, that I think are changing the way we define collaboration.
So Rick, you still have a wallet? I have no more wallet. My wallet is in my smartphone. So just kidding. No, I fully agree. I think it's thank you for the comment, by the way. It's a very good observation. And again, hope the days are gone that the capabilities of or bringing in technology is not anymore a discussion, but is a given, and really will improve your productivity as a whole, and not just because the IT department says so. I think that is an important one. Yeah, very good comment and very, very relevant.
I did lose my smartphone 2 weeks ago, and for about 24 hours, found it. I would have rather lost my wallet than my smartphone, I have to tell you that. But thank goodness I found it. And this question, you've talked about it, but I'm going to, because someone did post it, I do want to mention, how has COVID-19 impacted our use of devices? I know we just talked about how we can't live without them.
Yeah, I think the other thing that has changed is the whole what device you use to interact with the organization writ large. So, we used to have this bring your own device policies, and do you use tablets or smartphones, and can they all access the corporate assets? I think that's changed, as well as the where and the how, what devices you use are now. It's use all of them, right? Use your, I have 4 devices on my desktop, and I would have more if I had the room, right? And they all work together. So I think that conversation has been changed by COVID. Use your smartphone, use your tablet, use your laptop, use your television, right? For gosh sakes.
Yeah, everything connects seamlessly over the cloud. They're all synced over the cloud. It's one account, and they're all at the same status as long as they keep connected. And that's, I think, the key is which devices, well, the connected ones. And then if you have the right provider and capabilities and security enabled by your IT department, then you should be able to use any device seamless over any medium.
We can only hope so. Well, I have another wonderful comment. Great session. Thank you, Elizabeth, John, and Rick. As a former ASAE Research Committee member, it is so exciting to hear about the ongoing discussions and about the ASAE research, and I would agree with that. Research doesn't end when the report is released. There's so much more knowledge developed post-dissemination through discussions like these, and I truly agree with that. One more question. So how can employees influence employers to recognize structural changes, new techniques, the marriage of digital and physical, et cetera? And how can we translate that to our members?
Yeah, it's a good one. I'll give you an anecdote, and I'm not saying you should all do it, but I'll tell you what we did in my past, and it worked. So at one employer, we had one type of laptops or operating system allowed in the company. And there were a portion of employees who wanted to use something else, the Windows versus Apple discussion, right? And guess what happened? Some employees wanted to use an Apple, but it was corporate policy that it was going to be Windows machines. And guess what? The employees started using the Apples. And of course, there was no support. So they organized in between the Apple users their own support group. And you can imagine what happened, right? Over time, the amount of Apple devices actually got so large that the company had to adopt Apple as a second standard. And I would echo the fact that Rick just said, right? Make sure that it doesn't really matter anymore what kind of device you're using, as long as you adhere to a number of policies and practices like security, like double authentication, things where you are sure that the person who claims who or she is really that person. Those are things which are important. But for the rest, it doesn't really matter anymore. And so what I think is the way forward is how employees should enable their management teams and their employers is by setting the example, and by letting them listen to sessions like these, and by allowing others to come forward and say, hey, it is not more dangerous to use this device versus that device, as long as there is a number of standards in place which can prevent somebody hacking or somebody going and doing things they shouldn't be doing on the internal network. So that is my personal take. Don't get me wrong on the trying to enforce other systems, but that's what we did in the past, and it worked very well. Rick.
Yeah, I think the question was about what can employees do to influence employers, right? So I think we're seeing it, right? I think if you look at statistics for the last couple of months, more people have left their jobs than in our recent history. And they're leaving their jobs because they figured out that they can work from anywhere. And if their employers don't allow them to work from anywhere, they're going to go find another employer. And that's just putting it bluntly, that's what's going to happen. So the way employees can influence, that the power dynamic has shifted now. And I referred to this in the session that I think the single most important skill set for us as leaders is to learn new leadership styles. We can't do command and control anymore because employees are going to work from where they want to work and promote the lifestyles that they want to pursue from wherever they want to pursue them. And, bandwidth is becoming ubiquitous. You can get it on top of a mountain, you can get it at the shore, you can get it in the city. So, as long as that's there, you can collaborate and work digitally. So I think the way that employees are influencing the employers is they're asking and demanding new workplace and new workforce arrangements that are blended more by this digital and asynchronous kind of work that we talked about during the session.
Just a couple more questions. These are very tech focused. What importance does multi-factor authentication have for today's workforce members?
Yeah, I'll give you my spin. Traditionally, we had a password, and people were using the same password across 50, 60 different applications. I'm sure some of the people in this audience are still doing that. Well, you shouldn't. Do not. So the one way to help ensure that you are you and that you are allowed to actually access this resource or network device or whatever is to do double authentication, so that through another device, you need to ensure that you can claim you are you and not somebody else. So that's how you, in a portion of it, avoid it. On the other side, what I do, I still do use multiple or two-factor authentication on most of the things I can. And for the rest, I have, For every different login, I have a different password, and a 16 or 25 digit long password. And I have a vault where I store those things in, and they change over time. So you need to be helping your employees with that. So not just enforcing to change their password every 3 or 6 or 12 months, but help them understand how they need to manage that, because not many people know that. So I think employers should be much more forthcoming in assisting the employees to do a better security management. Rick, what do you think?
Yeah, we have a security practice in our company, and we get a lot of questions from chief operating officers and chief financial officers about this. And I can put it in economic terms. Most of the cyber insurance carriers are out there are now making it a provision in their cyber insurance policies that you use two-factor authentication for everything. And if you don't, then you're going to be at risk for getting, if you have an event, of having them refuse or not cover a claim. So, just in economic terms, two-factor is going to become much more important. And just as a primer, the security layers is something which is your password, right? We've had those for decades. And then there's the next layer up, which is two-factor, which is something that you have, which is a PIN number or something like that. And then the third and multi-factor is those two plus something you are, like a biometric, right? Like a retina scan or a thumbprint. That's the progression. Something that something you have, and something you are are the three layers of security. Those are going to become, I don't know that we're going to have retina scans, before you can log into systems, but you certainly are now in a position where two-factor, I think within the next 18 months, are going to become required as a function of your cyber risk insurance policies that we all now need to be carrying on our organizations.
Okay, one final question here, and this is actually a good one. What communications do you recommend if you were hacked? What could that mean for your work and remote gig workers?
That's always a touchy topic, right? Is what you are, the first set of there are requirements about if you are housing personally identifiable information and you've experienced a hack, there are some legal requirements about what and who you communicate with. And those are different for different industries. If you're in healthcare, it's one thing. If you're not healthcare, and if you're other industries, there are different layers. So be very familiar with those things and understand exactly who you're legally required to communicate with. Then I think the next level is that you need to be communicating with your board when you've experienced a hack, that it's occurred, and that you have an incident response procedure and policy in place for doing that. There's no universal template for that. They vary based on your situation. So whatever your incident response policy is and whatever it says about communication is what you need to be doing.
Yeah, and people might think I don't want to talk about it, but you are in some ways obliged to talk about it. And you will be a better company if you talk about it, because then your stakeholders, typically your customers, know that it happened, but also what you're doing about it. And it shows you as a company what you really are. So I fully agree with Rick there.
Thank you. I think we have just about finished all the questions at this time. Andrea, I'm going to turn this back over to you to close.